Before we get into this story, let me ask you something. Have you ever loved your family, but still had to protect yourself from them? This isn't a tale about drama. It's a story about boundaries, truth, and the moment I finally stopped shrinking to keep the peace. If you've ever had to choose yourself, you're going to feel this one. I was standing in the narrow hallway of my parents' house in Brookford, a place that always smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old expectations, when my older sister stared directly at me and said, like she was announcing the weather forecast, "My media profile is tanking, so I used yours." No apology. No pause. Just a clean, careless confession meant to slide under my ribs and stay there. My father didn't even blink. He mumbled, "Family shares. That's how we've always done it." As if she hadn't crossed a line that didn't even have a name yet. I didn't shout. I didn't question. I didn't perform the shock they expected. I simply picked up my bag, walked out of the house, and carried the weight of their silence on my spine. That night, I opened my laptop, uploaded the proof, and by morning, her glossy little empire was no longer quiet. But before I get into the full story, tap the like button and drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. If you've ever dealt with a sibling who treated your life like a spare key, tell me your experience. Your stories remind me I'm not the only one navigating family storms. My name is Raina Coyle, and if you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd probably paint the same tired portrait. The steady one. The reliable daughter. The soft-spoken sister. The person who keeps the peace even when it costs her air. Never loud. Never messy. Never disrupting the picture-perfect image my parents loved to display. It's ironic how people confuse quiet with harmless. They forget that still water can hide a riptide strong enough to drag entire ships under. My sister, Solene Coyle, learned early how to swallow space. 3 years older than me, louder, flashier, she moved through life like the spotlight was her birthright. My parents, Franklin and Maria Coyle, fed that belief like it was gospel. They applauded even her smallest victories. They excused her outbursts as passion. They interpreted her recklessness as creative spirit. And me? I was the soft contrast that made her shine brighter. Our family home in Brookford looked warm from the outside. Smooth brick walls, trimmed hedges, a porch light glowing like an invitation. But inside, the air had a ranking system. There was a script we all memorized without ever speaking it. Solene dazzles. My parents cheer. I stand to the side, smiling politely, never enough to overshadow, never enough to disrupt. 2 weeks before everything cracked open, we'd gathered for brunch. Cinnamon French toast perfumed the house. Sunlight spilled through the bay window. My mother's polished glassware sparkled across the table like an exhibit. Solene swept in 20 minutes late, draped in a burnt orange coat that looked less like clothing and more like a declaration. She launched immediately into stories about her latest branding projects, the elite circles she was cultivating, the weekend retreats she'd been invited to. My parents leaned forward, breathless, absorbing every word like scripture. When her eyes finally landed on me, she gave me that familiar, tilted smile. Still doing that little communications job? I laughed, the small, controlled kind I've trained myself to use whenever someone underestimates my actual work. No agency names required. My job revolves around pattern analysis in online identity misuse, fabricated profiles, digital behavioral mapping. I spend my days distinguishing truth from curated illusions. A skill I didn't know I'd soon need at home. Because even at brunch, something about Solene's stories wasn't adding up. The brand deals she bragged about didn't match her real metrics. Her sudden surge in popularity seemed manufactured. The glow she flaunted didn't align with the numbers I'd quietly observed. I tried to swallow the instinct to question it. But instincts are stubborn things. Later that evening, back in my apartment in Enfield Square, I tried to shake off the unease. My place is my sanctuary, soft lighting, minimal decor, a space where noise must earn its place. I brewed ginger tea, sat by the window, and told myself I was overthinking. But truth has a way of tapping your shoulder. And when the alert flashed across my screen a few days later, the tapping became a shove. It was a notification from a digital monitoring service I use professionally. A new online account had been created, under my name, with my credentials, using my likeness. Not mine. Not approved. Not even close. Most people would panic. But something in me went completely still. Because suddenly everything from that brunch aligned. The sudden spike in her visibility. The polished content that didn't sound like her. The interviews she claimed she accidentally forgot to send my way. I opened the report. A full-scale influencer profile. Crafted using my photos, my writing style, my credentials. All repackaged to build her new image. She hadn't just borrowed my identity. She had impersonated my voice. I called Solene. She picked up on the second ring, sugar dripping from her tone. Her, "I'm above this" voice. "Hey Rain, what's up?" "I got an alert," I said evenly. "A profile using my data. Did you make something using my information?" She let out a short, amused laugh. "Relax, girl. My numbers were slipping. I needed a boost. Your name has better reach. It's not that deep." My heart didn't drop. It hardened. "Solene, that's digital impersonation." She groaned. "Oh my God, don't be dramatic." Before I could respond, I heard footsteps and my father's voice entering the room on her end. "What's going on in here?" "She's mad about a little profile I built using her background," Solene said casually. "My brand needed help." My father didn't gasp, didn't correct her, didn't even sound surprised. "It's not a crime if it's family," he said, like he was reciting house rules. I pulled the phone from my ear, not from pain, but from clarity. A clarity that felt like the coldest truth I'd ever held. In their world, Solene's convenience mattered more than my boundaries. Her ambitions outweighed my professional safety. Her impulses were my burden. I hung up with no explanation. Back at my desk the next day, I opened the profile again. The posts weren't mine. The captions weren't mine. The public statements weren't mine. Her attempts to replicate my tone were sloppy, exaggerated, almost theatrical. And, worst of all, some of the posts contained questionable statements that could jeopardize my career. Whoever helped her build it believed I'd stay silent. They were wrong, because silence can be a weapon, but so can truth. And I was finally ready to choose mine. I spent the next morning doing what I always do when something feels twisted beneath the surface. I followed the facts. My office in downtown Enfield Square hummed with the soft drone of printers, distant conversations, and the muted clicking of keyboards. The atmosphere was steady enough to keep me grounded while everything inside me sharpened into focus. I logged into the systems I normally use to track digital impersonation cases. Except this time, I wasn't investigating a stranger. I was investigating my own life. The identity trace report loaded slowly, line by line, each detail striking like a small bruise. The profile Solene built under my name wasn't just active, it was thriving. Posts scheduled weeks in advance. Brand partnerships lined up. PR inquiries answered using my persona. Statements written in a tone that could be twisted into unprofessionalism. A growing audience assuming I was the one speaking. Someone, likely Solene and whoever she collaborated with, had crafted the account with just enough precision to avoid flagged fraud triggers. But not enough precision to fool someone trained to see the seams. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling tiles as the weight settled into my bones. For the first time, a flicker of fear moved through me. Not the panic kind, the kind that whispered consequences. I work in a field where misrepresentation, even by association, is enough to ruin everything. Reputational integrity isn't just important. It is the foundation. People in my field don't get leniency. We don't get misunderstandings. We don't get to explain away digital messes. Solene had placed my career on the edge of a cliff, and she did it for clout. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother, Maria Coyle. "Your sister is upset. Don't turn this into chaos." Another one from my father, Franklin. "Fix this quietly. Family doesn't need conflict." Conflict. That's what they called it. Not violation. Not boundary-shattering impersonation. Not the theft of my professional identity. Just an inconvenience they wanted swept aside. I didn't respond. People who refuse to see the magnitude of harm don't deserve the energy it takes to outline the damage. Instead, I opened a secure work folder and created a new file. Not an accusation. Not a retaliation. Just documentation. The same method I'd used for years on cases involving influencers, executives, politicians, people who lived in curated illusions until reality kicked the door in. I screenshotted every post made under my name. Every caption that imitated my voice. Every PR response she crafted pretending to be me. I saved the analytics report showing the spike in her following suspiciously aligned with the launch of the false profile. I archived every message where Solene bragged online about her creative breakthrough. I saved the praise she received for statements she didn't write. I documented every red flag, every inconsistency, every fabricated credential she attributed to me. I wasn't documenting out of revenge. I was documenting because truth deserves a record. Hours passed. People trickled out of the building. Lights dimmed until only my screen glowed softly across my face. My reflection stared back, calm, expressionless, steady. I scrolled through the folder one last time. Row after row of clean, undeniable evidence. Then I clicked upload. A small progress bar appeared, carrying the weight of the next chapter of my life. It completed in seconds. I closed my laptop gently, almost ceremonially. My parents wanted peace. Solene wanted praise. But I wanted my life back. The next morning, the sky over Brookford was pale gold, soft and gentle, deceptively quiet. I wasn't there in person. I didn't need to be. At 7 a.m., a notification from the internal monitoring system appeared on my phone. Action initiated. Review team dispatched. No drama. No theatrics. Just professionalism unfolding. 5 minutes later. Entry executed. I exhaled slowly. Not triumph. Not relief. Something deeper. A steady release of breath that comes when the truth finally has a place to land. Later, I would learn the details. How Solene opened her luxury apartment door wearing a satin wrap dress, irritation written across her face, assuming it was a delivery. How her expression fractured the moment she saw the team badges. How she stumbled over excuses, confusion bleeding through her practiced confidence. How she tried to reclaim her charm, only to watch it wither under the weight of professional scrutiny. They assessed her devices, collected records, secured everything tied to the impersonation account. None of it surprised me. Entitlement doesn't crumble neatly. It breaks fast, loud, and messy. By noon, my parents knew. I felt the anger before their calls even reached my phone, as if disappointment had its own frequency vibrating through the walls of my apartment. When my father's name flashed across my screen, I didn't answer. Let him sit with the silence. Let him taste what they always serve me. It wasn't cruelty. It was equilibrium. But I knew a confrontation would come. And when it did, I wanted to stand in it fully, not shrink like they expected. So that evening, I drove to the house I'd grown up in. Not because they summoned me, because I wanted to walk into the moment on my terms. The Coyle living room was usually a shrine to Solene. Warm lighting, polished furniture, framed photos of her milestones illuminated like museum pieces. Tonight, the room felt smaller, denser. The air held its breath. My father stood by the mantel, arms folded tight, jaw clenched. My mother sat at the edge of the couch, shredding a tissue one nervous wrinkle at a time. No greeting. No embrace. Just condemnation suspended in the air. "What did you do?" my father asked, voice trembling with fear. Not fear for me, but fear for the narrative he'd woven around Solene all her life. I set my coat on a chair. "I protected myself," I said. "She's your sister," he snapped. "And she pretended to be me," I answered. "She created a public identity using my name. She misrepresented my credentials. She put my career at risk." My mother stood, breath hitching. But did it have to be this? A team at her home? Neighbors outside? "Raina, you humiliated her." I met her eyes, steady. She humiliated herself. I didn't force her to steal my work. I didn't force her to impersonate me. I didn't force her to lie. My father stepped forward. "You could have worked this out with us. I almost laughed. Like you worked it out when you told me not to be dramatic? When you minimized it to protect her feelings? He opened his mouth, then closed it, a realization flickering in his expression. She didn't mean harm, he said quietly. That doesn't erase the harm she caused, I replied. My mother's voice cracked. She's terrified, Raina. She should be, I said, soft but unwavering. The room froze. Not in anger, in truth. A kind of truth they weren't used to hearing. Where is she now? I asked. Being interviewed, my father said, bitterness curling through the words. Good. My mother covered her mouth. How can you say that? Because accountability is the only thing that will stop her, I said. She didn't impersonate me because she needed help. She did it because she thought she could get away with it. Because you taught her that consequences were optional. I paused, letting silence settle like dust. This time, the cost isn't mine. My father looked away. My mother sank onto the couch. The certainty they'd always clung to, the myth of Soline's brilliance, the belief that I would always bend, fractured right in front of me. I walked past my parents toward the hallway lined with framed memories, almost all of them featuring Soline. Soline at her dance recital. Soline at her high school awards ceremony. Soline receiving the keys to her first apartment. Soline glowing at every milestone. There wasn't a single photo of me alone. Always beside her. Always the supporting character in my own family's narrative. For the first time, I let the realization settle without swallowing it down. When I turned back to my parents, they both looked smaller somehow, like their certainty had cracked around the edges. You've always asked me to stay quiet, I said. But silence isn't love. Silence is permission. And I'm not handing that out anymore. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break. I simply stated the truth, and the truth itself filled the room. My mother wiped her eyes. My father shifted uncomfortably. The roles they had written for us no longer fit. I left the house without another word, closing the door behind me with a quiet click. Outside, the afternoon sunlight was sharp and cool, the kind that follows a storm when everything is washed clean. As I walked to my car, I felt an unfamiliar steadiness settle in my chest. The kind of steadiness that comes when you finally stop carrying someone else's weight. Halfway back to Enfield Square, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I pulled over to read it. Interview complete. Statements consistent. No irregularities found. Plain. Neutral. Final. It didn't reveal the content of Soline's interview, just confirmed what I already knew. Every piece of evidence aligned with the truth. A few hours later, another update appeared. Digital assets secured. Materials linked to impersonation account under review. No need for details. In my field, I know how methodical these reviews are. How every piece is examined. How every line of code is traced. How every document is preserved. Justice isn't theatrical. It's precise. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to relief. Not because Soline was being held accountable, but because I had stepped out of the role she trapped me in. No longer the sister who absorbs. No longer the daughter who bends. The days that followed settled into a strange, quiet lull. Not the suffocating silence of my childhood. This one felt lighter, cleaner, like the air after a heavy downpour. The official notice arrived midweek. The impersonation account had been fully dismantled, and the responsibility for its creation placed exactly where it belonged. Soline wasn't dragged across headlines. There were no public scandals. Just private, firm consequences enough to stop the damage. Enough to restore what was stolen from me. My parents didn't reach out. Or maybe they did, and I let the calls dissolve into missed notifications. It wasn't spite, it was space. Breathing room. Distance long overdue. 3 days later, an envelope slid beneath my apartment door, hand-delivered by courier. Inside were revised family trust documents drafted by the Coyle family attorney. Updated terms. New safeguards. Clear boundaries that never existed before. For the first time, my parents acknowledged on paper what they could never say aloud, that the system they'd built around Soline had become a weapon. that their favoritism had consequences, that ignoring my boundaries had finally cost them. At work, my supervisor, Damon Price, a man who rarely smiled but noticed everything, stopped by my desk. He tapped a beige folder lightly against his hand. "We're developing a specialized task group," he said, "focused on emerging reputation abuse cases, fabricated personas, digital dupes, identity mimicking in the influencer space." He paused, meeting my eyes in a way that felt deliberate. "We need someone who understands not just the technicals," he added, "but the human fallout. Someone who's lived the cost." He didn't know the full story, not the personal pieces, just enough to see the patterns. I nodded slowly, letting the weight of the offer settle. This wasn't just another assignment. It was a door, a shift, a chance to rebuild something on my own terms. For once, life didn't feel like something happening to me. It felt like something I could steer. And quietly, I realized what happened with Solene wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the pieces of myself I'd given up in silence. Family shouldn't be a shield for harm, and belonging shouldn't require loss of self. I sat with that truth for a long moment. Then I closed the folder, set it aside, and let my next breath settle deep in my chest. The story wasn't finished, but for the first time, it was finally mine. In the days that followed, the world around me moved with an odd, deliberate quiet. Not the tense hush I grew up in, the kind that demanded obedience, but a balanced kind of stillness, the kind that comes after you make a decision powerful enough to shift your life's axis. Friends at work noticed I seemed lighter, though they couldn't place why. I didn't offer explanations. Some truths don't need an audience. Toward the end of the week, I was walking into my building when my phone buzzed with a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. I didn't recognize the voice, but the message was clear. Review completed. Recommendations submitted. You'll receive formal confirmation soon. I stood there in the lobby for a moment, letting the words echo inside me. The impersonation case, the profile Solene built using my name, my credentials, my voice, was officially closed. And the responsibility had been placed exactly where it should have been from the start. No drama, no spectacle, just truth doing what it always does when it's finally allowed to stand. I went upstairs to my apartment, set my bag down, and looked at the envelope of updated trust documents my parents had sent days earlier. I hadn't touched them since they arrived. Not because I didn't appreciate the gesture, but because healing and repair are not the same thing. It takes more than signatures on paper to undo years of silence. That evening, I made myself dinner, roasted vegetables and lemon herb chicken, and sat at my kitchen island, letting the quiet fill the room. I thought about Solene, not with anger, with clarity. She wasn't malicious at her core, just accustomed to being the sun around which everyone else revolved. My parents built that orbit for her, polishing it, protecting it, feeding it. But Solene had grown comfortable with a world where consequences were optional, where talent could be dramatized, where shortcuts passed for strategy, where my boundaries were background noise. I sipped my tea and exhaled slowly. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel responsible for her. The next morning, Saturday, I drove to Briarwood Park, a quiet patch of green on the edge of Enfield Square. I walked the perimeter trail, letting the wind brush against my skin, letting the sunlight settle on my shoulders. Every step felt like a release. Halfway around the path, my phone rang. My mother. I considered ignoring it, but something in me was ready to hear whatever she had to say. I answered. "Raina," she said immediately, her voice tight. "Your father and we've been talking." Her tone wasn't scolding. It wasn't panicked. It was something unfamiliar, uncertainty. "We didn't realize how serious things were," she continued. "Your father, he thought it was just family stuff. He didn't understand." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't interested in soothing them through the discomfort of realizing they were wrong. My mother exhaled shakily. "We handled this poorly," she said. "And we know it. We're trying to fix what we broke." I stared ahead at the tall river birches swaying near the park's entrance. Their branches moved in unison, like they were nodding. "Solene asked about you," my mother added hesitantly. "She's been quiet. She's different right now. Not angry. Not blaming. Just humbled. I let her words hang. My mother cleared her throat. She wants to talk to you when you're ready. I walked slowly toward a bench, sat down, and crossed my legs. I'm not ready, I said softly. And I won't rush myself just to make everyone comfortable. My mother swallowed hard, but she didn't argue. That alone felt like a shift. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, watching families walk by, listening to the distant chatter of kids playing tag. Life continued, oblivious to the storms people carried inside them. When I finally stood and walked back to my car, I felt lighter, not because everything was resolved, but because I'd stopped pretending their rhythm had to dictate mine. That evening, I met up with my friend Nisha, an art curator who always managed to catch my emotional weather before I even spoke. We sat outside a cafe under soft string lights, the air warm and buzzing with weekend energy. She studied my face for a long moment, then said, "You look like someone who finally stopped apologizing for taking up space." I smiled. A real one. We talked for hours about work, boundaries, healing, and the strange relief that comes after choosing yourself in a way that feels irreversible. When I got home that night, I found another message waiting for me, this time from my supervisor, Damon. Your insight was invaluable. If you choose to join the task group, leadership is prepared to adjust your role accordingly. A promotion. Not in title yet, but in influence. For once in my life, the opportunity wasn't handed to the loudest person in the room. It was offered to the one who had always been doing the work. I closed my eyes, letting the moment settle inside me. My story was shifting shape, not because of Solene, not because of my parents, because I chose a different ending. And for the first time, the future felt like something I was allowed to write on my own terms. The following week unfolded with a quiet steadiness, as if my life had tilted into a new rhythm. A rhythm I didn't have to fight for. A rhythm that didn't demand shrinking or silence. On Tuesday morning, I received the official confirmation email. Case closed. Misattribution corrected. Original identity reinstated. The impersonation profile Solene built under my name had been completely dismantled, its posts archived, its reach reversed, its misleading statements removed from circulation. Every piece of public content was traced back to the source. My name had been restored. I sat at my desk in the office, letting the words sink into me, deeper and steadier than relief. This wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming something that should have never been taken. Later that afternoon, Damon walked past my cubicle, placing a folder on my desk without breaking stride. Inside was a formal promotion offer. A leadership role in the new task group, the one dedicated to investigating digital impersonation and online reputation abuse. A role built from the very storm I had survived. I read through the offer twice before closing the folder gently. For once, my accomplishments weren't overshadowed. For once, my work spoke loudly enough without needing to compete with anyone else's narrative. When I got home, the sun was dipping behind the buildings, casting soft orange streaks across my living room wall. I changed into comfortable clothes and curled up on the couch with a blanket, letting the calm settle around me. My phone buzzed. This time, it wasn't my parents. It wasn't a system update. It wasn't an unknown number. It was Solene. Her name lit up the screen like a faint echo of every memory, every comparison, every shadow I'd been placed in. For a long moment, I just stared at it. Part of me expected anger or entitlement or some dramatic attempt to regain control. But when I pressed play on her voicemail, her voice sounded nothing like the Solene I knew. She sounded small. "Raina, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I get that. I'm not calling to ask you to take anything back. I'm calling because I didn't understand what I did. Not really. I thought using your work was flattering. Like sharing. Like borrowing brilliance. I didn't think about what it cost you. I didn't think about how it could hurt your life." She paused, her breath shaky. I messed up. I messed up in a way I can't fix with charm or excuses. I know that now. I'm not asking for forgiveness today. I didn't want you to think I didn't feel it. I do. I feel all of it. Silence lingered at the end of her message, as if she didn't know how to close something she'd never learned how to own. I set the phone down, staring at the city lights flickering through my window. I didn't cry. I didn't harden. I didn't rush into a response I wasn't ready for. Healing doesn't require instant reconciliation. Growth doesn't demand a performance. And forgiveness? That's a choice, not an obligation. 2 days later, my parents called again. This time, I answered. My father's voice was subdued. Reina, your mother and I were trying to understand. We're trying to do better. We didn't see the harm. We should have. We won't make that mistake again. My mother added softly, we're here. Whenever you're ready. No pressure. I believed them. Not because they said the right words, but because something in their tone had shifted. A gentleness I had never heard before. A surrender, not of authority, but of ego. That evening, I signed the promotion documents and sent them back to Damon. The next day, I arrived at work earlier than usual. The corridor was quiet, the morning sun warm against the polished floors. I walked into the new task group office, my office now, and placed my bag on the desk. A desk I had earned. A desk no one could take credit for. A desk that didn't shrink me. As the day unfolded, team members drifted in, analysts, strategists, researchers, all ready to build something I had helped shape. Something that would protect others from the very harm I had endured. Later that afternoon, during a brief break, I stepped outside to the balcony overlooking the city. The wind brushed against my cheeks, carrying a scent of warm asphalt and promise. Below me, Enfield Square moved with its usual rhythm. Cars winding through intersections, people stepping in and out of cafes, life pulsing forward. My life was pulsing forward too. Not because someone finally noticed me. Not because Solene fell apart. Not because my parents revised legal papers. But because I finally chose myself, fully, unapologetically, deliberately. If you've ever had to draw a line with someone you love, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation, you know the weight and freedom of it. Boundaries don't break families. Silence does. Pretending does. Surrendering yourself to keep others comfortable does. I took one more deep breath as the wind swept across the balcony. The next chapter of my life wouldn't belong to my parents' expectations. It wouldn't belong to Solene's shadow. It wouldn't belong to the quiet girl who let herself be overshadowed. It belonged to me. All of it. And for the first time, that was enough. Some storms don't come to destroy. They come to reveal what needed to be rebuilt. In choosing myself, I didn't lose a family. I found my voice. The moment I stopped shrinking, my life finally had room to grow. Healing isn't about going backward. It's about stepping into a version of yourself that silence could never contain. And if anyone ever tries to rewrite your story without your permission, remember you have the right to take the pen back. Always. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below and share your experience. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you love? Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next episode. Your voice matters here. Your story matters here. And I'll be right here with you for the next chapter.